Hello my dear friends, you're in the middle of a summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 24 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the previous night both the Russians and the Ukrainians once again attacked each other. The Russians, according to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, during the previous night used 173 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine. And once again the Russians were attacking objects of energy infrastructure, warehouses, ammo depots, fuel depots. The most important attack took place in the most northern parts of Ukraine, in the city by the name of Chernihiv, and this video was published this morning. And here we can see several explosions that were taking place on the territory of the city, and later pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Russians attacked the Chernihiv power station, and furthermore pro-Ukrainian sources today stated that the Chernihiv power station was completely destroyed and is no longer operating. Another attack took place on the territory of the settlement by the name of Shostka, which is located in the most northeastern parts of the Ukraine, in the northern parts of the Sumy region. And here we can see a moment when the Russians attacked a warehouse on the territory of the settlement, and we can see a very heavy explosion. Most likely the Russians are trying to find ammo depots, warehouses, and sometimes the Russians may attack even empty buildings just with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to use any infrastructure for these purposes. Lots of explosions were recorded on the territory of the city of Izmail, which is located in the most southwestern parts of Ukraine. As of the city of Izmail, during the previous night, the Russians were mainly concentrated on the port infrastructure of the settlement. Furthermore, explosions took place on the territory of the city of Kryvyi Rog, and this time in the most southwestern part of the settlement. The Russians attacked this substation, this very important substation of the city. In this video we can see the Russian drones that were attacking this substation. As a result of attack, according to pro-Russian sources, this object of energy infrastructure was completely destroyed. So we see that every single day the situation for the Ukrainians and for Ukraine itself as a state is getting worse and worse, and we see that there is no end on the horizon for this conflict. Another attack and few more attacks took place on the territory of Dnipro region. In this video we can see a Russian drone that was attacking objects on the territory of the settlement. The sources are saying that as for this situation, this warehouse was destroyed. So this is a bus station that the Ukrainians use for the civilian purposes. So buses and trucks from this bus station move through the territory of Dnipro and transfer people from one side to another. So lots of explosions took place here as well. Explosions took place on the territory of the settlement of Lazova, which is located in the southern parts of the Kharkiv region. As for the city of Lazova, this is a very important settlement. This settlement plays significant role in the entire Ukraine's logistics. So we have a very big railway station, and the city of Lazova basically connects different parts of Ukraine across and through the line of combat contact. The railway lines from the city of Kharkiv, Dnipro, Zaporizhzhia, Kostiantynivka, Sloviansk are moving right exactly through the city, so which means that the Russians most likely during the previous night were attacking objects of energy infrastructure, objects of the logistic infrastructure of the city, and so on. And of course lots of explosions took place on the territory of the city of Kharkiv and around the settlement. Last night Russia carried out a combined attack on Kharkiv Oblast. Approximately 10 Gran 2 drones of the second generation attacked targets in the city of Lubotin, resulting in multiple large fires breaking out as seen in Media 1 and 2. So this is the situation, and according to these updates about these attacks, we see that the Ukrainians either don't have air defense system at all, or they're trying to save missiles for some days for some more dangerous attacks from the Russian side. But the question is what kind of attacks could be more dangerous than the attacks that we are witnessing these days during the previous that we have witnessed since the beginning of the 14th of April of 2026. The Ukrainians also attacked the theater of Russia, and this picture was published by pro-Ukrainian sources this morning on the 17th of April of 2026, and according to this picture, up to 270 drones were launched by the Ukrainians deep inside of the theater of Russia, but as of the morning of the 17th of April of 2026, we haven't received anything that can confirm that the Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage. Maybe in days, in hours, we will receive updates. The most powerful attack that was carried out by the Ukrainians took place yesterday. We have already discussed this, but let's talk about this a bit again. So I would like to remind you that yesterday the Ukrainians attacked the city of Tuapse and destroyed or damaged, most likely probably damaged significantly, the Tuapse refinery, and we received this video from this area. A very heavy black smoke over the settlement, which means that probably several reservoirs were damaged or even destroyed. And this is the picture of the Tuapse refinery from the satellite view. As you can see, a big and heavy smoke over the settlement. So this is the situation with strikes and with attacks, and let's of course wait and see what is going to happen next. But we see that as of the beginning of the 17th of April of 2026, the Ukrainians haven't improved their air defense capabilities, and the Russians are using this situation in their favor, and the Russians continue attacking and bombing the theater of Ukraine with dozens and maybe even hundreds of drones, and the Russians will continue doing this. And the Russians are doing this just with one purpose: to support their forces on the ground while conducting major offensives between the cities of Sumy and Kharkiv. I would like to remind you that several days ago the Russians began their major offensive operation in the Sumy direction, and during the previous days significant changes on the ground were recorded. This information about changes on the ground was confirmed both by pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian sources, and we see that the Russians continue advancing. But as of the morning of the 17th of April of 2026, we haven't received anything additional about the Sumy offensive operation, but we received lots of updates about the Kharkiv offensive operation, where during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to improve their positions. First of all, according to different sources, the Russians improved their positions around the settlement of Veterinarna in the Kostiantynivka direction. So the Russians captured the settlement according to different sources, according to pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers, and the Russians, as we can see, are going to continue advancing further in the southern direction towards the settlement of Kostiantynivka. The settlement of Kostiantynivka is a very important settlement in this direction, because if Russians are able to establish complete control over this town, then this will allow the Russians to concentrate huge forces up to one brigade around the settlement, which is obviously enough to continue offensive operation further, both in the direction of the settlement of Zolochev and in the southern direction towards the settlement of Slatina. I would like to remind you that these territories were already under Russian control at the beginning of 2022, but the Ukrainians restored control over these settlements during the Kharkiv counter-offensive operation that started in the late somewhere in October or September of 2022. The northeastern parts of Kharkiv region, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of updates. As you can see, we have huge changes on the ground. This is the end of the 16th of April of 2026. This is the beginning of the 17th of April of 2026. This morning, pro-Russian sources from the Group of Forces North and the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed that the Russians, as a result of clashes, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Zybyne, which is located on the Russian side of the river of Volcha. And we see that the Russians continue their offensive operation and their attempts to establish complete control over the territory to the north of the river of Volcha. So as you can see, this blue line is the river of Volcha, and now the Russians are concentrated and are tasked to establish complete control, probably first over the territories to the north of the river and then over the territories to the south of the river. So it seems that every single village along the river of Volcha, the Russians are tasked to take on the complete control within the next weeks, maybe months, probably before the beginning of maybe even June of 2026. And from this foothold, the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the direction of the settlements of Belый Kolodец and Veliki Burluk. The Russians have no other option, but they will continue offensive operation in this area because the Ukrainians are using this territory. They use this territory to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia with drones and with missiles. So that is why the Russians will continue their buffer zone operation in coming weeks, almost until the end of the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, whether this conflict will be settled ever. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sloviansk direction. These days we have lots of changes. There are still very heavy clashes between Nikolaevka, the river of Seversky Donetsk, and Kriva Luka. The Russians are moving in this area, but they're not so fast. But from the other side, the Russians improved their position significantly to the south of the settlement of Alexandrovka, and these are the changes on the ground between the previous 3 days. For example, this is the end of the 14th of April of 2020. First, we received a report that the Russians improved their position significantly in the pocket. The next day, by the end of the 16th of April, we have colored this territory completely based on the video that was published by pro-Russian sources, where we can see how Russians were clearing trenches, fortifications, and strongholds that were either under complete control of Ukraine, or probably the Russians didn't take these territories, these strongholds, under control because they were mined, and the only way to demine them was to destroy these strongholds with explosives. So that is why, based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the pocket collapsed and the Russians established complete control over the territory. And this morning, several pro-Russian sources stated that the Russians improved their position significantly towards the settlement of Yurkovka, and the Russians are about to establish complete control over the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal to the west of the villages of Minkovka, Golubovka, and so on. So as for this part of canal, there are still very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians still have possibilities to introduce additional forces on the Ukrainian side of canal, but these days we can see less and less examples of these operations from the Ukrainian side. The battle for the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal and the river of Seversky Donetsk is coming to its logical end. The settlement of Kostiantynivka. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded in the southern parts of the settlement. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. The Russians are trying to establish complete control and to secure the territory to the south of the settlement between the settlements of Berestok and Ivanopolia. And the Russians continue offensive operation with the purpose to gain stronger positions in the southern and the southwestern parts of the city. But despite all these changes, we see that the Ukrainians still hold their lines. Today, or more precisely during the previous 24 hours, several pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Russians have introduced additional reinforcements, additional reserves in amounts of 20,000 troops in the Kostiantynivka direction, in the more precisely Donetsk direction. The sources are saying that the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over the rest of Donbass, over the rest of Donetsk region by the beginning of September or by the end of September. But one thing is clear, and I would tell you that 20,000 troops is not enough to establish complete control over the rest of the Donetsk region. Obviously, the Russians need more, but maybe these 20,000 soldiers is something like extra reserves in case if something goes wrong. Now let's move further. Small changes were recorded to the south of Sergeyevka on the territory of the Pokrovskaya mine. So here we can see a Russian soldier that was moving through these constructions, and here we can see how Ukrainians were trying to attack Russian positions on the territory of this facility. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Russians improved their positions in this area as well. The Zaporizhzhia direction without changes when talking about the eastern parts, but when talking about the western Zaporizhzhia direction, we have significant changes, and these are the changes on the ground between the previous since the beginning of the 15th of April of 2026. Several sources, several mappers, mainly pro-Ukrainian sources, stated that the Ukrainians launched the western Zaporizhzhia counter-offensive operation, similar to the counter-offensive operation that was carried out by the Ukrainians in the northern Zaporizhzhia direction operation in the area of the settlements of Gulay-Polye and Uspenovka. And as you can see, according to these reports that were published mainly by neutrals, pro-Ukrainian sources, we have adjusted the map. We have added additional gray zone, contested area, infiltration zones, and so on. But telling the truth, this morning several pro-Russian sources stated that the Western Zaporizhzhia counter-offensive operation, so this one failed, the Ukrainians were defeated and were forced to fall back. So of course we need to get additional videos, geolocations, or different changes published by reliable sources, and then we will adjust the map back, because just statements from different sources are not enough to make changes in this area. But the most important thing is that we start receiving first updates on this matter, that this counter-offensive operation failed and that the Ukrainians were forced to fall back. We have covered most of the updates regarding the situation in Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation in the Middle East. And the most important thing is that negotiations between the United States of America, Israel, Lebanon, and Iran continue. Today we received lots of updates on this matter. The President of the United States of America stated that in addition to the statements just issued, I will be inviting the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, and the President of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, to the White House for the first meaningful talks between Israel and Lebanon since 1983. Another important thing, I just had excellent conversations with the highly respected President Joseph Aoun of Lebanon and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu of Israel. These two leaders have agreed that in order to achieve peace between their countries, they will formally begin a 10-day ceasefire at 10 p.m. East. Another important statement, I hope Hezbollah acts nicely and well during this important period of time. It will be a great moment for them if they do. No more killing, must finally have peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So the most important thing and the most important idea that today the negotiations between Lebanon and Israel began. And this is a very important situation. We will see a 10-day ceasefire between these states, which means that the Israeli forces, the Israeli Defense Forces, would be forced to stop along the border, along the current situation on the ground, and they will not continue their buffer zone operation further. So we have different statements on this matter. A ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has come into effect. This is a very important statement. Another important thing, that according to information we have, and despite the statements that were made by the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, there are still very heavy clashes, not very heavy clashes, but there are still positions on the territory of the settlement of Binj-Bail, despite the fact that many mappers adjusted their maps in this area in the Israel Defense Forces favor. The sources are saying that there is still resistance from the Hezbollah units, so which means that maybe in coming days the map would be adjusted once again. But at the same time we have some changes in the buffer zone. According to information we have, the Israeli Defense Forces managed to improve their positions in the area of the settlement of Marwahin, Tuta, and of course the settlement of Yarina. So, and based on the report that was published by different mappers, we have adjusted the map in this area. So this is the situation, let's say, from the Israeli Defense Force positions. But there is another point of view, and this is a very interesting opinion of experts who try to analyze the situation in the southern parts of Lebanon. The most important thing is that these days we start receiving more and more videos of FPV drone attacks and FPV drone strikes carried out by Hezbollah forces on the vehicles and tanks and positions of Israeli Defense Forces on the territory of the southern Lebanon. So at the beginning of this conflict, at the beginning of the buffer zone operation, we received probably 1-2 videos a day. But now we receive 5, 6, 7 days, 7, maybe even more videos a day, which means that the Hezbollah forces are intensifying these activities, and as of now we see that more precisely we don't see the similar activities from the Israeli Defense Forces. So several experts came to the conclusion that maybe this is the main reason why the ceasefire was announced, because maybe the Israeli Defense Forces didn't expect such a resistance from the Hezbollah units. And the most important is not the question about the resistance itself, but the warfare that this fraction is going to use to fights on the southern parts of Lebanon. Once again, dozens of episodes of FPV drone usage, and this is a very, very critical situation. We know what kind of consequences FPV drone clashes and FPV drone activities can lead to. We know a very good example about this, the territory of Ukraine, because when talking about territory of Ukraine, both the Russians and the Ukrainians have millions involved in this operation, and neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians are able to move fast and with big pace of offensive operation, and both the Russians and the Ukrainians suffer huge losses. So which means that if the same warfare, the same tactics will be used on the territory of the southern parts of Lebanon, then this can lead to completely unpredictable consequences and significant losses from both sides. So which means that maybe this is the reason why the ceasefire was concluded, for further probably orders, for further understanding how the things will develop. Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz remained blocked. According to information we have added 2 blockade lines. This red line, this red area, is the blockade line according to the CENTCOM, the US military authorities. According to the map that was published yesterday, this is the blockade line, and according to the United States of America, nobody can cross this line if when talking about vessels and tankers, and if they are linked to the Iranian ports. As for the Iranian side, they have established blockades between the islands of Larak, Shahri, and the territory of Kashab. So this is the blockade line of the Iranian side, and they allowed to cross the Strait of Hormuz to the north of this island of Larak and to the south of the island of Hormuz. So this is the situation. The movement of ships as seen on marine traffic in the Strait of Hormuz and the entrance to the Gulf of Oman over the past 36 hours shows that traffic through the strait is still significantly below normal levels as the blockade of Iran by the US Navy continues. So this is the situation in this area, but despite all these things, we are receiving reports that the United States of America and the Iranians are planning to continue the negotiation process, and maybe in coming days additional papers, additional documents would be signed both by Iran and the United States of America, which will of course reduce the pressure on oil prices. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.